Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. My name is CY. You can find me at tokyostationpens.com or on Instagram at tokyostationpens.
And my name is Jacob, and I am Foodafan on Instagram, and I have a blog at foodafan.com.
Hi Jacob, always nice to be joined by you. This time it's just the two of us, finally. It's much easier for editing, honestly.
I can imagine, yes.
Oh my god, editing 4 people is just a nightmare. And actually, that weekend I was away from Tokyo as well, so that made it even harder. But now we're back, just the two of us, but it doesn't mean that we have any less exciting news. Let's start with new acquisitions, Jacob. These 2 weeks have been interesting for you, haven't it? You've got something quite special and unique that you even wrote a blog post about.
Yes, so this is a fun one. So every once in a while, you look through the sailor pen listings on Yahoo Auctions and Mercari, and you see this curious pen with this theta engraving, and that looks like a bent clip. And the other day, our friend Leo posted a photo of one of those pens on Instagram, and that inspired me to find out more about these pens, and in particular, what was this theta? Because I had never heard about a theta pen club. It's a club that we're not aware of, and it turns out that this is much weirder than that. So, first of all, these pens were released in 1996, which was Sailor's 85th anniversary. And Sailor first released a limited edition urushi pen, a designed urushi pen with an exotic nib option. Actually, I think that was a bit of a tangent, but that was the first time they ever sold the crosspoint nib. So the theta pen was the first pen ever with a crosspoint nib.
Didn't know that.
And later on the same year, they released a more standard-looking Prophet theta, which was basically a standard Sailor Prophet, but with some theta branding on it. And it turns out, based on the research I've done, based on the blog posts I found and so on, that the inspiration for these pens was something called Hado, which is this Japanese spiritual concept about healing waves and vibrations. And that was apparently something trendy and popular back then. So theta is not a pen club. Or there may have been some club called theta as well, but theta in this case refers to a kind of brain waves, so theta waves, which are associated with deep meditation and relaxation. Now, theta waves are actually a real thing. That is something you can measure. But the idea that theta waves are sort of have healing effects, that's where it gets a bit less scientific, I guess. And that's where it becomes more of a spiritual thing. And so the question now is, what does this have to do with the pens? Well, so based on what I found online, Sailor apparently claimed that the nibs on these pens were treated by a Hado specialist. And as a result, because these nibs had gotten this special treatment, when you wrote with the pens, somehow it encouraged these theta waves to happen, and it was very healthy for you. And there were even these claims about improved immune defense. And I saw that mentioned in a few places. I could not find any official information from Sailor, and that is usually the case when you try to research, about old Sailor pens. It's just very hard to find, product documentation, and that is something that I think we mentioned that before. But Tsunami-san, in his book about Sailor, he says that Sailor has almost nothing in their archives back in Korea. So it is hard in general to find official information from Sailor, but all of these blogs seem to suggest that these pens were inspired by this Hado movement, and there's a spiritual theme to these pens.
Yeah, so actually, your blog is not the first time that I've seen a Theta Club pen. Actually, I've handled one before because my girlfriend's grandfather, who has unfortunately passed away a few years ago, he owned a Theta Club pen.
Oh, really?
And so I never met him, but once I went to her grandparents' place out in Kyushu, and her grandmother handed me this pen and said, my husband was using this pen and loved using this pen, but the cap was cracked, so it would dry out. So she wanted to have me fix it as kind of a memento, kind of like a memory of her husband. So when I saw this pen, the engraving is very, very special, I think, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean anything, but it's still it's a cool pen. So I had brought this to the Manehitsu Byoin, so Fountain Pen Hospital in Japan, in Nagasaki, and I asked the people there what the story is, and as you said, they told me it's actually not a pen club at all. It's in fact one of the anniversary pens. And the funny thing, Jacob, is that my girlfriend's grandfather was a doctor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So those nibs fit onto modern pens as well. The one that I had was a small size 1911, so I fit it in one of my spare 1911 bodies and sent it back. And yeah, so those are pretty nice nibs. As far as I could tell, writing with it is exactly the same as a 1911.
I would say so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no. I didn't feel any theta waves when I wrote with them. But there's at least 3 versions of this pen, I think. So we have the anniversary one with Urushi, and then we have a large Prophet Theta, so equivalent to Prophet 21 or 1911L in the US. And then we have the small one with a small 14K nibs. There may have been a small 21K nib too. But yeah, you still do find them online. What they usually have in common is that the cap finial is in bad condition, and you can get them for a good price for that reason.
Yeah, yours is in like a silicone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, because the same thing happened to the one that I was repairing, is that the finial broke off.
Yeah.
So I think there must have been some kind of production issues with the finial.
That might be it, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, on my side, I got actually 2 interesting pens, and they both happen to be Sailor as well. It's really difficult because I love Pilot, but they're very boring. So I don't find myself compelled to buy any Pilot pens. But Sailor has these interesting bodies, and they do all these special designs. And I think that's a big, big part of the reason why they have so many fans, especially overseas as well. So, a few weeks ago, I had this Pentanoto Honto no Hoshizora, and it honestly, I forget what nib it became of.
That's the sort of bright blue with sparkles, right?
Yeah, that's the bright blue with sparkles. Came with some random nib, and it came with just a regular HM nib. So I stuck that nib in another pen. It's a different story. But I was prowling Yahoo auctions, as one does in the evenings.
Of course.
And I you find sometimes these like secondhand shops for some reason selling fountain pens on Yahoo auctions. And I have no idea why, but they get these like basically new products, new in-box products, and they put them up for less than retail price. Now, usually these pens are your standard run-of-the-mill Sailors. Fine, they're kind of boring, but you can get them at less than standard price, so great. Occasionally, you'll get some Naginatas, but they're usually the new version, regular standard Naginatas.
Yeah.
And so, fine as well. They're usually listed for, around, same, I would say, as retail price. And then this one was special because it is the new version nib, which I like and I had actually been looking for. But with a layered nib. So this is a cross point that I have here in my possession. And when I saw it, I wasn't seriously expecting to win the bid. I just put in the bid saying, if I got it for this price, it would be a steal. So I put in the bid. My bid was 60,000 yen. These retail for 70,000 yen with tax that makes 77,000 yen.
Right.
And then with shipping it would be like 78,000 yen or something. So I won this bid, surprisingly, shipped to my door for 60,000 yen. 60,000 yen. Which is still very, very, very expensive. And I don't think I will be able to make too many purchases for myself in the coming months because this is an insane purchase. But I have to say that this nib is incredible. Now, I think actually I may know why sometimes these secondhand stores get these nibs, because when I got this pen, it was in the box. It was wrapped in the plastic, and the plastic was sealed, so you actually have to, tear it apart. Tear it apart, and I pulled the nib out. And if you've never pulled a sailor nib out, you might not know, but on the feed, there's a part that is there's an elevated part, and then in the nib, there's a notch to key in the nib and the feed, so you know exactly the orientation of the nib and the feed when you stick it back in.
Right.
So on this one, the notch was not cut perfectly, and so there's a bit of gold left that was protruding into the notch that you can't stick, or you can't key in the nib properly. So I just took a Dremel and I fixed the notch, so it's fine.
As one would do, yes.
Yeah, as one would do. It's a natural reaction. But not only did I notice that, I noticed that when I fit this nib into my Realo, the tines would be a bit separated, which indicates to me that the feed is not married to the section properly. So the feed is pointing a bit upwards. So I just heat set it, and that was problem solved. And also there were a little minor adjustment issues for this nib. So I just fixed them and went about my day. But there were clearly some imperfections with this nib, and I think that's why these shops do get them in. But I knew what I was going to do with this nib if I had won the bid anyways. So for me, it was not so big of an issue.
So do you think these were some kind of factory seconds that Sailor had sold through other channels? So, and did the auction listing mention this at all?
No, the auction listing didn't mention this because the pen it was in, it would have been fine.
Okay.
But
I see.
not with the other Sailor pens. And with this particular pen, I swap in my nibs all the time, so I know that there's nothing wrong with the section. But it's not so big of a deal when it comes to the bigger picture. And the important thing is now that I have a cross point. Now, I always thought that the cross point was a double layered naginata. Is that what you had understood as well?
I have never looked too closely at the cross points. I wasn't sure, actually.
Yeah. So I always thought there was a double layered naginata with the same grind, but with 2 layers, so it's bigger. I have since come to realize that the angle at which the cross point, the tipping is slanted, is different. So the cross point is slanted at about a 45-degree angle, which is actually how I grind my naginatas. The Sailor Factory naginata is a bit more flat, like I would say, like the under shape of a boat. So I would say it's more at a 25-75 angle.
Oh, I see.
Obviously it depends on the nib and who had ground the nib, but generally I've found that to be the case. So using this cross point is, to me, very reminiscent of using one of my own naginatas. And also the way that the nib is ground. And I got in the BS nib and studied it a bit as well. But I've noticed that the way that this nib is ground is by shaping the tipping inwards towards the slit. So you get a sharp edge, kind of like an architect, at the slit.
Right.
But when I look at sailor tipping, it depends on, obviously, the person that ground it, and it depends on the size. But perhaps the NB is ground actually not shaping towards the slit, but shaping outwards from the slit to the top.
But so this pen, if I understand correctly, this is from their new bespoke line. So this is potentially a post Nagahara model.
Yes, right? I would say that this is most certainly a post Nagahara model.
Because that ties into the price also. I think both of us were with much interest watching another auction for an older crosspoint or possibly cross music, and that one, which was probably either a junior or maybe even senior Nagahara, that one went much higher. So I wonder if there is just less interest from the collectors in these newer versions because they have less historical significance, perhaps.
Well, I would say that one, they're still possible to buy at the retail store, so there's no rush.
Right.
And second, actually, I saw the Crosspoint Theta Club, and that went for some crazy amounts of money.
Yeah.
The one that we saw, I think, also should be a senior grind, by the looks of it. Yeah, those, well, the man passed away, so can't get any more of those. So I guess that's why. Some people like to collect the different generations, and I'd imagine for this, for those kind of collectors, you walk in a store and you buy it off retail.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to try with this nib on the audio recording is I want to see if you can hear the sound that it makes. So, can you hear me writing?
Yes.
Okay. So normally when you write, that's the sound it makes. I think that's the sound that lots of fountain pens make.
Yeah.
So that's me writing at the normal angle. If I hold it a bit low and I kind of swipe my wrist across the paper, do you hear that? It kind of has a singing.
Yeah, definitely.
Right there. So when I do that, it actually spurts the ink out because of the vibrations in the tine, and the ink kind of splashes out in this. If you've ever used a folded nib, that's exactly how the ink looks like. So I find it interesting that I can use this pen kind of semi like a folded nib as well. That's great. And also this nib absolutely devours the ink that I have in this poor Rialo. The Rialo's capacity is not so high to begin with, but this nib is an absolute monster at drinking ink.
So does this mean you're going to be using this nib for your ink swatches, your ink cards from now on?
No, that is exclusively for my 149. I want all the swatches to be uniform and identical so that there's a point of reference.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that's the first pen that I got in. The second pen that I got in was from Nagasawa Kobe. So after our little Sailor Plus episode, I got a bit paranoid. And I decided, I've got to buy these store exclusives. We don't know when they're going to end. So I went on Nagasawa's website, contacted them, and I said, hey, do you have the fire department series that you did last year still in stock? And they said, yes, we have F and EF. Which one do you want? So I took the EF. I have no intentions of using that nib. So if you want to buy an EF Sailor nib, let me know. It's the large size. But the fire department release is a Rialo, and it's a red, kind of very subtle shimmers, glitter in the body, with transparent cap and piston knob to kind of remind of of the fire trucks lights when they're shining, the kind of wee woo, and then they have those I don't know what they're called, but kind of the alarm lights. So I got that in. The interesting thing about Nagasawa is that even though as a domestic customer, I could use PayPal to pay. So I used my PayPal credit rather than transfer my cash. That was really, really nice. And I've swapped it in with one of my Fude nibs that I made. It used to live in one of my Franklin Christophs, but now it's in the reality. Really, it's come home, as well as an Emperor tab. So I stuck in the Emperor tab, and I plated the Emperor tab rhodium.
Nice.
I don't know if there are any rhodium Emperor tabs. Have you seen any of those?
No, I probably associate that with gold trims. Yeah.
Yeah, I've only seen it with gold. So, if any of the listeners out there have seen rhodium Emperor tabs, do let us know. We'd like, it would be interesting to see because most of the time we see it in gold.
It's a bit of a tangent there, but it's not clear to me what pens came with that Emperor tab in general and why, because every once in a while on the second-hand market we see standard like medium nibs and fine nibs with Emperor tab, and it doesn't make sense to me, but I'm wondering if there's some story there that hasn't been told.
Yeah, absolutely. It's honestly quite strange to me because Sailor had already put so much emphasis on the feed design. I'm not sure if we talked about this before. I think we have, but reading Ross Stutler's blog, he had talked to one of the nib masters at Sailor, and he was informed that these feeds were designed specifically to optimize the ink flow from the end of the cartridge or the end of the converter into the feed and into the nib. So if you look at Sailor feed design, it's actually very, very different from the standard feed designs. And it has a lot of holes and openings and airways and stuff like that. It's quite a complex feed. So that being said, there's already so much optimization for flow in Sailor's feed. Why would you need to further optimize flow for a nib point? As you said, medium or fine. I think that if you think about how Pelican does it, because their nibs are so wet, they tune their inks to be dry, right? But Sailor inks are wet, their feeds are wet. Wouldn't you rather make the nib a bit drier so that it can write on all sorts of different paper? for me, it's just a strange thing.
Yeah.
All right. So our next topic.
Yeah, let's go to news.
So we have some interesting news, Jacob, and I think, to me, obviously the content is interesting, but the source is also really, really funny.
Yes.
Yes. So, why don't you talk about who was leaking this stuff?
So that was, if I remember correctly, that was in Nagahara. He posted on Instagram. And I don't know where he got the information from, if it was meant to be confidential, but we know from before that Nagahara, he did his own custom sailor converters. He cut them to be short enough to fit in the sailor mini size pants.
Right.
And apparently Sailor decided to do their own factory-made mini-size converters, and he was so excited about that he posted that on Instagram, and it may have been a bit sooner than Sailor would have liked.
Yes, so what I heard was that this announcement was supposed to go out, I think early August, I want to say. And I know that Sailor probably didn't want this to come out so early.
Right.
But tell us this background, the story of these mini converters.
So I don't actually know that much. I know that he made them himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, he wanted to use converters with the mini size pens, and the standard converters don't fit because the pen is too short, right? So he was cutting parts of the converter to make it fit.
Yes, and there are a bunch of people who are doing this also in Hong Kong. Is where I know, but for example, Pactagon is also doing in the States. So there were some people doing the mods by themselves. In fact, I have one right in front of me. The way that he did it is he cut the knob so that even when it's fully extended, it won't. The little piston rod inside doesn't protrude over the knob.
Right.
But at the same time, the knob has been shortened, and it's very clearly cut because he didn't cut it flat.
Yeah, we saw one yesterday, and it was pretty clear that that's not factory made.
Yeah. But then also on top of that, Jacob, now I'm unscrewing. Oh shit! So I'm gonna cut that off the recording. On top of that, I believe that he was also shortening the body of the converter as well, as far as I understood. So I think one way that you can kind of DIY this is by cutting the threads shorter. So you can just cut off a chunk of threads.
Oh,
so
I see.
In case anybody is unaware of how Sailor converters work, on the end of the converter, there's this metallic piece that's holding everything together. So you can unscrew that metallic piece. And once you unscrew it, your piston kind of knob comes out. And there's a piston rod in here. And it's held together by a piston connector. You pull the piston connector out, and you can see that there are threads that screw into the metallic part. You can, and yes, I can see that he's done that here. But you can cut short the threads, so just cut a chunk of threads off, and then stick everything back together, and you'll have a shortened converter. Yeah, so some people are doing that, but in Japan, Nagahara popularized it, and there were only, I think, just a select few stores that you can buy them from if you weren't buying them from Nagahara himself.
But then that page, that flyer with his announcement that he posted, it had some other announcements too. I'm not sure if he even realized that, but there was something about cartridges too, right?
Yeah. So there's this blank cartridges that you can refill with syringes. I don't think the syringe is included, but I think there's sets of blank cartridges. Jacob, I think this is quite interesting because they're clearly listening to the domestic market when it comes to this. Lots of people in Japan, apparently, and this absolutely baffles me, but they prefer to use cartridges,
right?
Because it's easier, no fuss. They don't have to think about it. You just pop the cartridge in, you're ready to play. But all the interesting inks are in bottles, right?
Yeah.
So I think two things. I'm not so sure that actually, because the interesting inks are in bottles, therefore the customers want to buy interesting bottles but cannot, and so they developed this product. I don't know if it's that, or Sailor has made a bunch of interesting inks in bottles that they cannot sell to the majority of a large group of Japanese fountain pen users. So in order to sell the bottles, they have to sell these cartridges.
But if this is what we think it is, then it's definitely a niche product, right?
Yes.
Because it's
yes.
I mean, if there's more work using these empty cartridges. First of all, I mean, at least based on the page we saw, what Sailor is selling alone doesn't have everything you need. So you need to go down to like Seria or Daiso and buy a syringe with a blunt needle, right?
Yeah.
And then so you fill it up, and that's fine. But then if you want to change inks, then you need to clean them. Or maybe the idea here is that you buy so many of these empty cartridges that you dedicate one cartridge to one ink, and you never need to fully clean them. In which case there will be less work, less maintenance, I guess. But still, it seemed like such a niche product.
Yeah, I think this. I was thinking earlier because most people are using cartridges in Japan. And when I say most people, actually, just your daily, random average Joe who's using a fountain pen at work because he received it as a graduation present or something like that.
Yeah,
they're using cartridges. So I thought maybe it would have targeted them, but maybe it's specifically targeting the inktonumas who are also afraid of bottled ink, or who want to travel with a bunch of different little inks. When they go somewhere without bringing the entire bottle, that could be the case.
But if you're afraid of bottled ink, then using a syringe with a blunt needle doesn't seem to make things less scary, right? And it still seems like such a niche product for me, because it's very different to use, a factory-made cartridge full with ink. You stick it in, you write, and you're done. You throw it away. That's very different from buying an empty cartridge and separately buying a syringe, filling it up, and then potentially cleaning it. That goes very deep into the enthusiast land.
Yeah, I don't know. The Sailor confuses me.
Yeah, they tend to do that. So,
we have more leaks. This time not from Nagahara himself, but we had a string of leaks from, I believe, Chinese vendors. The reason why I say this is because these posts originally appeared in the Chinese-speaking Facebook groups. And two things. The first is the Kure Azure. I don't think this is actually a leak. I think this was just announced. Kure is the place where actually Sailor is based.
Yeah.
Out in Hiroshima. So I had never heard of this cocktail before. I didn't know that there was a cocktail called Kure Azure. And I'm looking on Google, and it doesn't seem like anybody else knows that there's a cocktail called Kure Azure either. Or maybe I might be spelling it incorrectly or something. But I'm trying to look, and there's nothing. What this suggests to me is that the Kure Azure may be the last cocktail series. And
I'm not sure if the cocktail series matters as much today when everyone is selling their own colorful store exclusives. I think it made more sense before when you could buy a black pen or a dark brown pen or a cocktail pen.
Or a burgundy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, just a bit of background story about the cocktail series. It started 10 years ago. The cocktail series with first the Asian Way. I think the Asian Way is still the only pen in the cocktail series that is a prophet shape, so 1911 round finials. So that was 10 years ago, and since then they've released these different pro gears that are very, very highly sought after. Some, for example, like the Tequila Sunrise, people really, really like that. Blue Lagoon is something that's really, really sought after. It's a very popular series, not just overseas but also in Japan, and so you have really these beautiful and, as you say, unique pens. The Mojito, Piccadilly Night. I think those are all fantastic pens. Actually, Brad Dowdy and Mike were talking about this in the last episode too, but they were saying, wouldn't it good some random collectors go and hunt down all 10 of these? Well, now you can.
Right.
Because Sailor is celebrating the 10th anniversary by releasing a set of all 10 pens together. Of course, it costs a fortune, but not as much as if you were to hunt down each pen individually.
Right.
And it's only available to order from basically, I think, the end of this month to next month. So if you don't have any of these pens but you really, really want them, you should order the set, because it's the most affordable way that you'll be able to get all 10 pens. But that's also why I think this Kure Azure is going to be the last one.
So, do you think that this set will only be sold in Japan, or have you heard anything suggesting that it will be available elsewhere?
I have heard from some pen friends in the States that it will be available to order through retail in the States.
Okay.
But what they do not know is the pricing.
The price, of course, yeah. That could be a shock.
Yeah, there should be a significant markup in terms of this, because huge pen. Oh, and these are also made to order, so you cannot just walk into the shop and buy them. The shop has to order them for you, and maybe some shops will order multiple so that they can just have some in stock. But these will not last.
Right, that makes sense.
Yep. But yeah, I think they're nice pens. The Kure Azure is also coming out as a single release, which will be the normal limited run release. So you can buy the Kure Azure alone, or you can buy it as part of the set.
Do you know what nibs it comes with? Is it just fine medium, or can you get some kind of zoom or something like that?
So for the regular single edition, you can get all the nibs.
Okay.
But for the set, you can choose between fine, MF, and F. F, MF, and M.
Okay.
So
that sounds
fine,
conservative.
medium, and medium. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, and it comes in this nice display case.
Sounds good.
Okay. Next topic. We are still on Sailor.
Yes.
Because Sailor is running all these events recently, and they are running they ran actually yesterday this ink studio event.
Mm.
So you were there first. Why don't you run us through this ink studio?
Yeah, so Shosaikan in Aoyama, which by the way is probably one of the most beautiful retail stores in Japan, they had invited Sailor's ink blender Ishimaru-san to do his ink studio thing, and the concept is that you go there and you describe an ink that you want, and he will blend it for you. So and then he makes an ink just for you, and he will not sell that to anyone else. So that's the concept. We were a bit worried that the event would get cancelled because of COVID reasons, but they decided to do it as planned with various precautions. So yeah, I went there around 11 or just after 11, and my goal, what I wanted, is to make sort of a sailor version of Tag's Keshimurasaki. So Tag's Keshimurasaki is this beautiful sort of grayish blue-purple, wonderful shading, but it's incredibly dry.
Right.
So I wanted an ink that looked kind of like the same, but had the ink flow properties of a sailor ink. So I tried to explain what I wanted without explicitly mentioning that ink. So I said I wanted a grayish, this muted blue purple, and he made the first version, and I said, can you put a little bit more gray here, a little bit more blue, and eventually he made a blend that I really liked. And then once you get what you want, he makes one bottle, like 50 milliliters, I guess, and he uses the old vase bottles.
Right.
And then you pay 2,000 yen for that, and you also get in that in the package you get a card with a serial number, and that serial number is the unique number for your ink. So if you want another bottle of the same ink, you can take that card and bring to another ink studio event, and he's going to be able to make the same ink again, in theory.
But the problem is getting to these ink studio events because they're not so common, are they? They're
not so common, and they're usually incredibly popular. I think we talked about that before, but they usually are when they open for reservation, all the slots are filled in no time. So I think this time it was just because of the virus situation that they weren't fully booked. So the whole thing was a very fun experience, and not just because getting your own unique ink, but also to get a chance to talk to him, because I mean, just like Nagahara, this guy Ishimaru has a lot of knowledge and experience, and it's fun to get a chance to ask him questions. So, for example, I asked him about the standard 100 ink studio line, if there's any kind of meaning to the numbers, and he said that no, there's no. Well, internally at Sailor, they might have a numbering system that they're not going to reveal, but the whole point is that they're not meant to have a meaning. You're meant to make up your own meaning.
Right. But I've read on Macchiato Man's blog, and I think he has a point. There's clearly some kind of pattern.
Yeah.
There.
And that's what Ishimaru-san was hinting at too, that internally at Sailor, we may have a system, but we're not going to tell you, basically. But you shouldn't think of these numbers as meaningful. You should make up your own meaning. That was his point. Another thing I asked him about was iron gold inks, because I'm personally at the moment into iron gold inks. I was asking, what are your thoughts on iron gold inks? Do you make them? Would it make sense to make them? And he said that when he joined Sailor, and I did not ask when that was, but back in the day when he joined Sailor, he said he did, or Sailor did, iron gold inks. And the reason why they stopped is, as everyone knows, it's more high maintenance. But also the other point he made was that nowadays people want more vivid, more colorful inks, and because of the nature of iron gold inks, that they get dark and more muted over time, and that is not, at least now, what is popular. So that was another interesting bit of information from him. The third thing was what I asked them what paper he would suggest, especially if you have an ink like Sailor 123. If you want to really show off this ink in its full glory, what paper would you recommend? And I asked, would that be Tomoe River? And then he said, Tomoe River is fine. There are two other papers that I would recommend over Tomoe River. The first one is Null Refill, which, as we talked about before,
is awful.
It's synthetic paper. It's meant for shampoo labels, but it happens to have interesting ink properties, but it's not really for long form writing. So that's one. The other one, interestingly, that he recommended over Tomoe River was bank paper. He said you see the shading better, especially this chromo shading. You see that better on bank paper. That was his.
That's interesting.
His opinion.
That's interesting.
One last thing that I asked him about was going back to Sailor 123. I mean, can I ask you to make like a chroma shading ink like that? And he said, whenever we make an ink like that, it's completely by accident. I don't know what makes an ink have that property. I cannot do that on demand. So Sailor 123 is a happy accident.
Yeah, and I asked him too. I wanted a not necessarily a multicolor, kind of chromo ink, but I asked him if he can make an ink with halo.
Ah, yes.
And he said, basically, I don't know how to do that. So it's all up to chance.
Yeah.
Which was kind of awkward, I think. Basically, he was able to tune, I guess, wetness, color, and maybe to some extent shading. But you can't ask for something that's not like physically possible.
Right. Makes sense. So, what ink did you get?
So I got this pale pink color that shades well, and actually, in the end, it did have the a bit of the halo that I wanted. So I'm happy with the ink. Haven't decided what to call mine yet, though, because he asked me, what do you want to call your ink? And I said, oh God, I haven't thought that far yet, because I think that the name of the ink comes to you when you actually use the ink. So hadn't thought that far yet. Can you give me a moment? And he says, sure. And then so he goes on making my ink. Apparently, it took him like 30 seconds to make the ink, and I was there sitting for like 5 minutes thinking to myself, looking at my phone. And then I realized he's been looking at me for 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh, were you waiting for me? He's like, yeah, I'm waiting for you. I was like, oh, okay, then let's not go with the name first, and then next time I come to you, I'll tell you what the name of this ink is. So that was that. So my turn took about just 10 minutes.
Yeah, mine took a little bit longer, but that was sort of my fault because I talked to him so much when he was making the ink that he made a mistake once, and then I was told by Shosaika staff, can you be a bit more quiet when he's making the ink? Sorry.
Yeah, but it was quite fun. It was quite fun. Overall, I was in a bit of a later time period than you, so we had lunch and. Were really able to I was really able to understand how it all worked.
Right.
But it was interesting. There were actually a lot of customers when I was there.
Really?
Yeah, there were at least 4 groups.
When I went there, it was just me and Keiko at first, and then there were 2 other people, but it was almost empty.
Yeah, but I think you went in when they just opened, so that's probably why as well. But yeah, so that was very, very fun. I haven't actually inked any pens with my new ink yet, but I'll have to do that. And I also very fortunately got some of yours and Keiko's inks to test.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll be swatching those. So your ink, Jacob, you've decided it's
yes.
name?
So this I guess might tie into the next thing we're going to talk about. But we went to Bungubox afterwards, right? And we can talk about the Bungubox announcements later. But But we went there and we talked to Kaoru, who is always so delightful and friendly. And we showed her our inks, and she looked at my ink. And then she quickly walked over to the table where she had her own ink samples, and she said, "That's Sakanamachi Horoyoi."
Yeah. For those people who don't know this ink, do you want to give them a little background?
There's some kind of... So there's a town in Shizuoka, right? And it has something to do with Tokugawa. I can't remember what the story is, but I think they have some kind of a Matsuri festival when people get a bit tipsy, and that's where the name comes from.
Yeah. And what color is this ink?
So Sakanamachi Horoyoi is, I guess it's not so much blue. It's more of a like muted purple, but there's a little bit of bluish undertones, especially on certain papers, right? So we did a sample of my ink and Sakanamachi Horoyoi side by side, and I had to admit that they do look not exactly the same, but very similar. So I seem to have unintentionally cloned one of her most popular inks.
Yeah, it's one of definitely Bungubox's most popular inks in Japan. It's kind of a light purplish, as you say, gray purplish ink. I mean, it's cool ink. If those inks weren't so darn expensive, I'd probably have a few bottles.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was funny. So your ink's name is...
So recognizing this similarity, I named it Harajuku Horoyoi in homage to Bungubox.
Excellent. So then I'll update the listeners on what I name my ink next time.
Sounds good.
Okay. Speaking of Bungubox, then we learned a lot from Bungubox yesterday.
Yes.
Kind of unexpectedly, because we didn't plan on going to Bungubox, but it's there. So when you go to Shosaikan, you kind of just drop by Bungubox as well. Why not?
Yeah, we went there, and Kaoru was there, and because there was bad weather and because the virus infection numbers are pretty high now, it wasn't very crowded. We were the only people in the store, so at that time. So yeah, we had a very pleasant conversation with her, and we ended up learning a few things about upcoming releases. And just to preface this, to say, but we actually got permission to talk about this, so we're not leaking any confidential Bungubox information. But they are going to release 2 new pens in August, right? 2 new sailor pens. What were the names again?
So I think Kaoru, she's the owner of Bungubox, I think. I think she's a ink numa.
Yeah.
So she's a super ink fan, and she was, along with Kingdom Note, one of the first to popularize these store exclusive inks. And so she made this entire line of inks, and then she said, "Why not make pens inspired from these inks?" So she decided that this year, these 2 pens would be after the colors Sanctuary Blue and Omotesando Blue.
And these are sale. I can't remember. Are they Profit 21s or Pro Gears?
No, these 2 are Pro Gears. So the pricing of these pens, Sanctuary Blue will be 39,000 Japanese yen, and Omotesando Blue will be 35,000 Japanese yen. We learned from her that these would have some kind of daden decoration on the finials, at least. So this suggests to me that Sanctuary Blue will have more daden in the design of the pen versus Omotesando Blue. But Omotesando Blue is also a very, very bright blue. I think that's a more popular blue, whereas Sanctuary Blue is more like a greenish blue-black. So these pens will come out August 30th. So, really at the end of August, and these will be Pro Gears. But that's not the only pen that's going to come out.
Right.
Because the month after that, we're going to have a special kind of Swedish-inspired pen, she said.
And that's where it gets a bit... That's where I think we know less. She was a bit more secretive about that particular pen, because I think she thought that revealing the name would also reveal much more about what the concept is. So we don't actually know much about that pen. But then going beyond September and toward the end of the year, I think that's when we might see what may possibly be the most interesting Bungubox release this year.
So she mentioned this mysterious pen in September, so that's obviously very interesting. There's going to be another pen. I don't think this is actually a Bungubox pen. I think it's a Tips pen. This Tokyo International Pen Show pen that they asked Sailor for. So last year they did the Magic of Alice, which was fantastic. I personally really liked that pen.
But that was still a Bungubox pen, but it was a Tips exclusive, right? It was sold by Bungubox.
Okay. So maybe this time it's the same. Yeah, you're right. This year the model will be a Pro Gear Mini. So not the Pro Gear Mini Slim, but the fat Pro Gear Mini.
And that's what I think a lot of people will get excited about, because Sailor, back in the day sold these, fat minis. They haven't sold them for a while now, so they recently... They have sold the slim minis for a while, so we know that Nagasawa has sold various slim minis, and more recently Bungubox and also Sailor have had slim minis in their standard production line. But fat minis, it's been a while.
I think there are some in the States, but in some random different solid colors.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's hard to find. It's even hard to find on the auction sites and the Mercaris, so they're not so common, let's say. So she will be making a run of these for Tokyo International Pen Show. Speaking of Tokyo International Pen Show, though, I think it's pretty much been decided that there will be no foreign vendors at Tokyo International Pen Show, and it will be you'll have to order tickets in advance in order to go in, and there will be some kind of limitation to how many people can be in the space at a time. So you can't stay there for the whole day. You'll have to be there for your 1 hour or 30 minutes or whatever, and then just do your shopping and leave. Which is similar
to what the various retailers are doing today, and it's also similar to what Wagner did with their pen trading event. I think that is just a sign of how things are going to be going forward. And I think another upcoming event is this Inknuma, right? And they're going to do this pretty much the same thing, I believe. So you need to make a reservation. You can only be there for a finite amount of time.
Yep. And actually, Inknuma did that last year too. So
yeah, but that's true for a very different reason. But yeah, that's true.
Yes, they did that last year, but this year I imagine that there'll be much less tickets. So we'll be very, very much. We have to be more competitive in terms of grabbing the tickets.
Yeah, I'm sure there will still be fist fights over Tamiya bottles.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Anyway, so going back to Bungubox, at least to me there was one more interesting thing that she said, and that is that they're working on an English version of the website. So it's going to be easier for people overseas to order pens from Bungubox, because it's not entirely obvious how to do that today.
Right. And so she mentioned that they're trying to release it within this month, I think she said.
Mm.
Yeah, so it will be easier for everybody to go on the Bungubox site and to understand what's there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then lastly about Bungubox, she was supposed to host a Nagahara kind of nib pen clinic next week.
Yeah.
And we were supposed to get the Nagahara Blue Black.
Yes.
That event has been cancelled.
And just to be clear, only the part in Tokyo has been cancelled. So Nagahara is still traveling around Japan and doing pen clinics. And just after Tokyo, he is going to Bungubox other store in Hamamatsu in Shizuoka. And that is still happening. So he's just not going to Tokyo. And that apparently that was also his daughter told him not to go to Tokyo.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Tokyo is the most densely populated city in the world. And let's say that corporate culture here demands a lot of face time. So, even for my company, we're going into the office 3 times a week. Last week I was there 4 days a week. And so the trains I found to not be, let's say, I don't think that there are less people taking the train. I don't have the statistics, so I don't know, but when I'm on the train, I see crowded trains. It's not like the sardine cans anymore, but it's certainly not safe. Nobody's distancing. Even yesterday,
it's almost back to pre-COVID levels.
Yeah, when we went out to Omotesando, there were tons of people out in Omotesando. So it's not so. Let's say I don't feel that governments or companies are taking this seriously, and people are still going out. Obviously, we were going out too, so nothing really that we can say about that. But people are going like shopping and just window shopping as well, rather than having a very specific destination, going there and then going home. And as a result, there is a spike in cases. We've actually recorded the most number of cases in Japan yesterday since we've started to record cases. In Tokyo, particularly is bad. I think about a third of the cases are from Tokyo.
Yeah, I think so too, and many of them are young people. Many of them are related to evenings and bars and hostess clubs and things like that.
Yeah, I think some crazy thing 80% are in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah,
something crazy like that. So it's pretty bad, and Japan was supposed to have this Go To campaign where they kind of encourage domestic tourism, and the other prefectures are saying people from Tokyo don't come. So his daughter, it's totally fair. I totally agree with that. And his daughter, Nagahara is not a young man, so his daughter really begged him not to come to Tokyo, anywhere but Tokyo. So apparently she was crying and saying, Dad, please don't go to Tokyo. Go to the other ones, but don't go to Tokyo. And Bungubox told us that their main store, as I said previously, was headquartered in Hamamatsu, and they had customers in Hamamatsu, which is in Shizuoka. It's a different prefecture, saying that if Nagahara is doing the Tokyo event, then I don't want to go to the Hamamatsu one because I'm afraid that I will get infected.
Right.
So that's fair. It's unfortunate. I had this 14K small size fude that I wanted him to fix. The original owner had kind of unbent the fude nib, which is just an absolute disaster. But But there you have it. I have a straight Fude nib that doesn't write anymore. So I wanted him to take a look at that, but it'll have to wait. All right. What about some listener questions?
Should we just talk briefly about Tomoe River first? Do you want to explain what's going on there?
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about Tomoe River. So, actually, sometime in 2019, Tomoe River decided that they're not going to make... Sakai Technical decided they're not going to make Tomoe River anymore, so they're outsourcing to some OEM. Actually, for those of you who have the paper sampler, the Yamamoto paper sampler, it actually says that Tomoe River is changing to decided to not produce Tomoe River anymore. So they're outsourcing to this OEM. There's been a lot of drama about how the new Tomoe River has different specs. It shows color differently. It's printed in a different way. I suspect that I have some new Tomoe River books. They're okay. It's certainly different, but it's not. I'm not going to stop using Tomoe River because of this. And I think the impact in Japan will probably be limited just to Hobonichi. So, if you're using your Hobonichis because of Tomoe River, the paper will be changing from 2021.
The company that manufactures, or at least the company that developed this paper originally, is not Sakai, but a company called Tomoegawa Seishisho.
Oh, okay, yeah,
right.
Yeah. You must.
And so this company, this is like a big company. They're listed on TSC, the first section, and they were actually in the news recently because they were in financial news because they had developed some kind of environmentally friendly alternative to plastic, and the stock skyrocketed for that reason. So that kind of shows you what kind of products they're doing. So if you go to their website, you find things like electronics components, optical film for display and stuff like that. But then in the corner of their product page, they have something called specialty papers. And then you look at specialty papers, and they have a few different types of specialty papers. And one of them is Tomoe River.
Yeah.
What is interesting about their product description is that they say that they are selling Tomoe River as a thin paper for the printing industry. So because it's thin and because you get sort of vivid colors, it's ideal for catalogs and magazines. So you can make very thin magazines and save on shipping costs. That's one of the examples they mention. So I mean, we know, of course, that it is fountain pen friendly, but that is, not the property that they are highlighting. That doesn't seem to be what they optimize for. That seems to be perhaps more of a happy accident. So there are actually three types of Tomoe River paper that they are listing. So they have one called matte, and then they have the second one called techo, which I think is what we normally call 52 GSM Tomoe River. And that's the only paper where they're even mentioning handwriting as a possible application, because they're talking about how you can make very thin planners with this paper. And then the third one is called Tomoe River N, which I believe is the one we call 68 GSM. But here again, they are talking about that this is paper for magazines and catalogs. So I found it interesting how they're not really selling this as fountain pen friendly. I mean, we know it's fountain pen friendly, but that doesn't seem to be what they're selling it as.
So, maybe then it's Sakai Technical's technical papers branding of Tomoe River, but on all of the Tomoe River, so I have some loose sheets in front of me. I kind of panic bought a few bundles of loose sheet, but this is the 52 GSM. It says that especially when you write with fountain pens, you get the writing experience of wetness, and it doesn't bleed through, it doesn't feather, and that is the main point of this paper for fountain pens. So maybe that's the branding of Sakai Technical rather than Tomoegawa.
Yes, so my understanding is that Sakai Technical Paper is Tomoegawa's Dairy 10. They are responsible for making products and selling the paper, while Tomoegawa...
They're the sales channel, yeah.
Exactly. So Tomoegawa probably only developed the paper and then they might be manufacturing it, but it originated at Tomoegawa.
Okay. Yeah. So this has been discussed in a lot of different forums. So suggest you go read those to get a better handle of what's going on. But yes, Tomoe River will be different going forward.
But so one thing related to that I will say is that they call this techo paper, right? And we know that there are a few other types of techo paper that you can buy in Japan. So you have Stellargy's paper, you have Nolte's paper, you have Design Field's DP paper, and they're not exactly the same, but they all have similar properties. That is, they are very thin and they have quite a bit of coating, and they all more or less handle ink quite well, in the sense that you get kind of nice shading. Wouldn't you say? I mean, I know that you prefer Tomoe River over DP, for example, but wouldn't you say that they are belong to the same general category of paper?
Jacob, that's a particularly difficult question for me to answer because I don't use any of those papers. I use exclusively Tomoe River.
But I think I think that the paper that came with your plotter notebook, I think that was DP paper.
Yes, that I do use, and I have to say that I think it's a bit thicker. It feels a bit thicker, and it absorbs faster. So that paper is more developed for the domestic market where dry times are important. So that's why I think Ishimaru was also pointing to bank, because a lot of his customers probably use bank paper.
That's probably true.
So he's familiar with bank paper, probably more than Tomoe River. The dry time, I would have to say, in my plotter is better than Tomoe River. It's very quick.
Yeah, I would say so too.
And also there's no show through. So Tomoe River has a huge problem with show through, that you can see what you wrote when you turn the page. And this DP paper does not. So they're good in different ways. But my DP paper is more absorbent, so it absorbs my hand oils, and I'm not a fan of that. So when I do write with my DP paper, I always cover my palm. And I'm recently using my old credit cards, so the expired credit cards. I'm just putting them under my palm and writing with it, and then the card is plastic, so it slides as I write. So that's nice.
Yeah. I'm doing something similar. I bought one of those cheap Japanese transparent ishtajikis, which are you meant to put it below, right? But I'm using that to cover my palms for that reason.
Yeah, I wanted one as well, but I couldn't find one that didn't have hole punches and that were small.
Right. Yeah, they're a bit bigger usually. That's true.
Yeah, so I was like, credit card.
Yes.
So yeah, that's Tomoe River. We have also an interesting Q&A question. We're running a bit short in time, so let's just try to answer one or two.
Yeah, let's do the retailer one, I would say.
Yeah. So this question came from Malcolm through foodfan.com. Malcolm says, "Hi Jacob, thank you very much for another great fortnightly podcast. I always look forward to the great work that you and CY do. I do have a question in regard to the nature of business being done by Japanese pen shops with the rest of the world. I do realize that many Japanese businesses hesitate to sell Japan domestic market only products directly to overseas buyers, while certain companies like Wancher and Nagasawa sell to overseas buyers. and resellers like Pensachi openly advertise these Japan domestic market products on their websites? Is it because of contractual requirements that these Japan domestic market products are not to be sold abroad? Or if the overseas demand for these products are so insignificant that it's not worth their while to deal with non-Japanese speaking buyers? Was wondering what your thoughts were. Thank you, and I will be keeping an eye out for the next release in anticipation. Thank you for the work that you and CY do. Best regards, Malcolm. Well, thank you, Malcolm, for your question. It's a very interesting question, and we brought this question to a retailer so that we can get you the best answer. So when we went to Bungubox yesterday, we asked about these questions. Jacob, what did Kaoru-san say?
So if I remember correctly, in general, she can sell her own pen, so that these collaborations with, for example, Sailor that has Bungubox branding rather than Sailor's branding, because there's no one else selling products with Bungubox branding. She's free to sell that however she wants, but she cannot, or she's not supposed to sell, say, Platinum's, Shiun pen or a Pilot pen directly to overseas, because that's meant to go through the overseas distributors.
Yeah. So anything with let's say Platinum or Pilot or Sailor's name on the product, she can't sell.
Yeah.
And then when she goes to the pen shows, I think she does San Francisco, and she did one of the other, I think she did like Long Island or something a few years ago. But when she goes to those shows, she would rather sell the exclusives anyways. When it comes to online shopping, though, that's when things get a little bit murky. Officially, they're not supposed to do it, but some stores do. The important thing is to not advertise those products, but if a customer, if they send you like a message or something, or an email, some shops are selling it, but it's not something that the manufacturers want, because they have their own distribution network. So I think this doesn't really apply to the Japan domestic market aspect, but it does apply to the pricing. So, you can get an 823 here much more affordably than you can in the States. So the kind of price, let's say, gouging by the so-called gray market, Amazon Japan, is hurting their distributors, and I suspect that their distributors complain about this. And that's why officially Tokyo Pen Shop Quill, or I always get that name messed up, but the place that you can get the 823 with the FA nib are not selling overseas anymore.
Yeah, they did that before. I wonder if that happened around the same time as Pilot added a Vermilion 845 to their standard production line.
I think that those pens are different, though. They're shop exclusive, and that pen is a slightly different trade.
Right, but even if they're not exactly the same, they are similar enough, yeah.
Yeah, very similar for sure. And yes, that is around that time.
But I'm not sure where that leaves sort of forwarders, or whatever you want to call them, like Pensachi, because they, as far as I know, they buy basically at full retail price from domestic stores, and then they just sell them to people overseas. I think most of the pens they sell are like store exclusive. So they recently sold Ishimaru Bunkudo's that Gunkanjima pen. Although they didn't say it was Ishimaru Gunkanjima pen, but that's what they sold, right? I'm not sure if they are selling, standard production models. I think that's where it otherwise would get a bit more murky.
Yeah, I think there's nothing that they can really do about companies like Pensachi because the manufacturers don't have a contract with them.
Right.
So, Pensachi is a reseller.
Yeah.
So, they move volumes because of their great product photography, I think, and their recognized name, but they're not the original source, and you can they're always a bit expensive as well, I think. So I think that's the difference between those the companies, the retailers and Pensachi. So Pensachi is not a retailer. So in other words, Malcolm, yes, you're right. There are some contractual requirements. It might not be directly with the local retailers, but some contractual requirements from their distributors that don't allow pilots or platinums, for example, to be sold overseas, even though these products may not be available for that market. So similarly, for example, in Japan, we cannot buy the Manyo inks unless we get them overseas. So even if a retailer did stock or did manage to find a bunch of Manyo inks, the retailers here will generally not sell those. So that's the first part. But the second part, I think, why businesses hesitate to sell JDM products or Japan domestic market products is also because a lot of them don't speak English. So those that do, I find that if you message them, they will generally send to the overseas market, but the vast majority, so we're talking about like, Ishimaru Bunkodo and like, let's say Usagiya and more smaller companies like this, they might hesitate to sell overseas because they might feel like their English is not good enough to understand or to do business in. So that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
All right. So again, Jacob, this has been a long episode,
yes.
as these tend to be. The next episode will be, of course, in 2 weeks. So that is the weekend of the 8th. Oh no, that's the weekend of the 1st. Yeah. So unfortunately, we won't be able to talk about the Nagahara Pen Clinic. But I'm sure that we'll have some kind of news, some kind of Tono Limbs release. By the way, they're doing crazy releases right now, Tono Limbs. But yeah, we'll definitely have something exciting lined up for you for the next episode. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. If you haven't already, please consider giving us a rating on iTunes. That helps us rise in terms of the algorithm so that more and more people can discover our podcast. So your ratings will help us reach a wider audience. So if you have the time and haven't done it, please consider giving us a rating and writing a review. The review will really help people understand whether this is a podcast that they want to listen to or not. So please do take the time to consider doing that and telling a friend about it. Of course, you can always reach us as well at tokyoinklings.com. That's where we have all the show notes from all the past episodes, so you can go there and check it out. And if we're referencing something in this podcast that we discussed previously, you can always go back and listen to those. You can find the show notes from the website as well. My name is CY, and you can find me on Instagram at Tokyo Station Pens or at tokyostationpens.com.
And my name is Jacob, and I am Fudefan on Instagram, and I have a blog at fudefan.com.
All right, see you next time, Jacob. Bye-bye.